I'm a 29-year-old guy, and my name's Henry. I want to share something that's been building up for a while. If you've ever been stuck in family drama, you'll probably relate to this. It all started with my cousin's engagement party. My cousin, let's call him Matt, is a few years older than me and the golden child of our extended family. He's always been the center of attention at every family gathering. If there's a spotlight, you can bet Matt's standing right in it. Meanwhile, I've been in the background, quietly minding my own business. A couple of weeks ago, I got a group text from Matt about his engagement party. This wasn't just any gathering, it was going to be a full-blown, over-the-top celebration. The kind where people fly in from other states and dress like they're going to a red carpet event. My family loves to hype up Matt's achievements, so this party was being treated like the event of the decade. I'll admit, I hesitated before opening the message. My history with Matt hasn't exactly been smooth. Growing up, it always felt like a competition I never signed up for. He was the gifted one, the one who could do no wrong. When I got my first job out of college, my parents barely reacted. But when Matt landed a similar role, the family chat blew up with congratulations. It's been little things like that over the years, small but constant reminders that I'm not the star of the family show. A few months ago, at another family event, Matt made a comment that stuck with me. He was joking around, but it wasn't funny to me. He said, "Henry, this kind of fancy party isn't your scene. Don't stress about coming. We'll manage without you." Everyone laughed, but I couldn't shake how dismissive it felt. It was like he was saying I didn't belong, that I wouldn't fit into his picture-perfect event. I kept quiet at the time, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. When the engagement party invite came, I already knew I wasn't going. The thought of walking into that environment, knowing the kind of vibe Matt would bring, didn't sit right with me. It wasn't worth the stress or the inevitable passive-aggressive comments. I decided it was time to draw a line. But if you've ever tried setting boundaries in a close-knit family, you know it doesn't go over well. Within hours of me declining, the family group chat lit up. My aunt was the first to chime in, saying how disappointed she was that I wouldn't be there to support Matt. Then came the guilt trips. Family is everything. You'll regret this one day. And my favorite, it's not about you, Henry. Matt, of course, had to get his 2 cents in. He didn't address me directly, but started posting these cheesy, passive-aggressive memes about how real family shows up, and some people only care about themselves. It didn't take a genius to figure out who those were aimed at. My fiancé, Zach, has been my rock through all of this. He backed me up immediately, saying I was making the right call by skipping the party. Zach knows how draining my family can be, and he wasn't about to let me get sucked into their drama. Still, he warned me to brace myself for more fallout. He's been around long enough to know how these things usually go. Sure enough, my mom called me the next day. She wasn't angry, but her voice had that familiar edge of concern. She begged me to reconsider, saying it wasn't worth creating this much drama. "Just go for an hour," she said. "It'll keep the peace." I told her I wasn't changing my mind. She sighed, told me she understood, but I could tell she didn't. By the end of the week, the group chat had turned into a full-blown circus. I tried explaining my decision, keeping it short and respectful. That only made things worse. Someone, I think it was my other cousin, accused me of being petty and jealous of Matt. They threw in a few comments about how I've always been distant from the family. It was frustrating because I wasn't trying to start a fight. I just didn't want to go. My dad, who usually stays out of these things, called me privately. He wasn't taking sides but hinted that it might be easier to just show up and avoid all the noise. "Sometimes keeping the peace is worth it," he said. I knew he meant well, but it didn't feel right to compromise my boundaries just to make everyone else comfortable. The final straw came when one of my aunts texted me directly, accusing me of trying to sabotage Matt's engagement party. She said my absence would overshadow the celebration, which didn't even make sense. How could I overshadow something I wasn't even attending? Then Matt himself sent me a private message. He told me I needed to apologize for causing a rift in the family and said if I didn't, I should never bother showing up to family events again. That was it for me. I didn't respond. Instead, I talked it over with Zach and my therapist. Both of them agreed I was doing the right thing by sticking to my decision. My therapist reminded me that it's okay to prioritize my mental health, even if others don't understand. Matt didn't let up, though. A couple of days later, he posted this cryptic status on Facebook about ungrateful people ruining big moments. Some of my extended family members liked the post, while others texted me privately to say they supported me but didn't want to get involved. For now, I'm keeping my distance. I'm not going to the party, and I've muted the family chat. It's been exhausting, but I don't regret my decision. I ended up posting this here to see if anyone else has been through something similar. Update 1. It didn't take long for things to escalate after I decided not to go to Matt's engagement party. I thought the guilt trips and passive-aggressive memes in the group chat were bad enough, but that was just the warm-up. A couple of days after my last post, Matt dropped a long-winded rant in the family chat. It was one of those dramatic messages that started with, "I hate that I even have to say this," and ended with a passive-aggressive dig at certain people who clearly don't care about family. He didn't name names, but he tagged me right at the bottom, just in case anyone had doubts about who he meant. The family chat exploded after that. A few people chimed in with messages like "We love you, Matt," and ignored the negativity. Others were a little more direct, saying I was being selfish and making everything about me. At this point, I felt like I had no choice but to respond. I kept it short and civil. I wrote that I wished Matt and his fiancée the best and hoped their party would be everything they wanted, but I wasn't going to engage in this drama anymore. I muted the chat right after sending it, thinking that would be the end of it. Spoiler, it wasn't. That same evening, my younger sibling, let's call them Chris, called me out in the group chat. Chris and I have never been super close, but this still caught me off guard. They said I was being difficult and causing unnecessary drama by refusing to go to the party. I couldn't believe it. We've always kept things cordial, and now they were piling on like everyone else. Then came the private messages. My inbox blew up with DMs from relatives. Half of them were supportive, saying things like "I get where you're coming from and Matt has always been over the top." The other half? Not so much. Some accused me of being petty and jealous, while others lectured me about family values and letting things go. One particularly aggressive cousin sent me a string of messages that went from scolding to outright insulting. That's when Zach, my fiancé, stepped in. He didn't hold back. He messaged the cousin directly, telling them to stop harassing me and focus on their own life. The cousin backed off after that, but the damage was done. As if things weren't chaotic enough, another cousin decided to chime in. They dredged up old grievances from years ago, stuff that had nothing to do with the current situation. They brought up a family vacation from when I was a teenager and accused me of being standoffish even back then. It was like they'd been waiting for an excuse to unload every little issue they'd ever had with me. The next morning, I got a surprise visitor. One of my aunts showed up at my house unannounced. She came armed with homemade cookies and a heartfelt speech about how I should reconsider going to the party. She meant well, but it was overwhelming. I told her I wasn't changing my mind and she left looking disappointed. Later that day, I got a call from another cousin who's usually pretty neutral. They told me the family was split down the middle over whether I was in the right. Some thought I was justified in setting boundaries, while others were convinced I was being dramatic for no reason. Apparently, Matt had been telling everyone that my absence would ruin the party's energy. That same evening, Matt sent me a direct message. He didn't outright say I was uninvited to the wedding, but he heavily implied it. He wrote something like, "If you can't even show up for the engagement party, I don't see how you can be part of the wedding." I left the message on read. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I found out that one of my relatives had posted something vague but recognizable about me on Facebook. It was one of those passive-aggressive statuses about some people making everything about themselves. A coworker of mine saw the post and asked me about it at work. I was mortified. That was the moment I decided to start blocking people. I blocked the relative who made the Facebook post, along with a few others who'd been stirring the pot. I also unfollowed Matt on social media because I couldn't deal with the non-stop updates about his perfect life. A couple of days later, Matt sent another message. This time, he demanded I apologize publicly in the group chat for ruining the vibe of his engagement party. He framed it as if my decision not to attend was some massive betrayal. Not long after, my mom called me in tears. She begged me to apologize and said I needed to be the bigger person for the sake of the family. She kept repeating how hard this was for everyone, and how much easier it would be if I just went along with things. I told her I wasn't going to apologize for setting boundaries, and she hung up sounding upset. At this point, I turned to Reddit again. I needed some outside perspective because the whole situation was getting out of hand. I shared everything that had happened since my first post, from the public call-out to the private messages and my mom's reaction. The responses were overwhelming. Most people told me to stick to my decision and not let my family guilt me into doing something that would make me miserable. For now, I'm holding my ground. I've muted the group chat again, and Zach has been a lifesaver, reminding me that it's okay to prioritize my peace. I know this isn't over, but I'm taking it one step at a time. Update 2. I should have seen it coming, but somehow I still felt blindsided when my parents called to tell me they were organizing a family meeting. The goal? To resolve the tension surrounding Matt's engagement party. My mom's tone made it clear this wasn't optional. Zach, my fiance, didn't even hesitate when I told him about it. He said he was coming with me. I knew bringing him along would ruffle feathers, but at this point, I wasn't walking into that lion's den alone. We showed up at my parents' house on Saturday afternoon. The moment we walked in, I could feel the tension. Most of the family was already there, seated in the living room, with Matt holding court in the center. As soon as Zach and I walked in, there were a few exchanged glances and, of course, the inevitable eye rolls. Matt's fiance wasn't there, which was a relief. It seemed like this was strictly a family-only ambush. Things kicked off with my mom giving a speech about how this situation had gotten out of hand and how we all needed to talk it out like adults. Before I could say a word, Matt jumped in. He went straight for the jugular, accusing me of always being distant and unsupported. He brought up every single time I hadn't attended a family gathering in the past 5 years, conveniently leaving out the fact that half of those were due to work or prior commitments. When I tried to explain my reasoning for skipping the engagement party, Matt interrupted me almost immediately. He waved his hand like what I was saying didn't even matter and launched into another tirade about how family events are sacred and how I was ruining his moment. A few relatives nodded along like this was the gospel truth. Then, out of nowhere, one of my uncles piped up and said he thought I was just jealous of Matt's success. That comment flipped a switch in me. I laid it all out. The years of favoritism, the constant comparisons, the passive-aggressive comments from Matt and others. I wasn't yelling, but I made sure my voice was steady and clear. I pointed out specific instances, like the time Matt got a standing ovation for getting a job while my similar achievement was barely acknowledged. The response was exactly what I expected, denial and dismissal. Some of the family acted like they had no idea what I was talking about, while others brushed it off as me being too sensitive. Matt, predictably, doubled down. He accused me of overreacting and said I was making everything about myself. Just when I thought the entire room was against me, one of my aunts spoke up. She's always been more of a quiet observer, so hearing her voice surprised everyone. She said it wasn't fair how the family treated me, and that I had valid points. She even backed me up on the favoritism, saying it was obvious to anyone paying attention. The room went silent for a moment, and Matt's face turned bright red. That silence didn't last long. Matt suddenly stood up, pointing at me and yelling about how I was tearing the family apart and ruining everything. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. A couple of relatives followed him, probably to comfort him or keep him from breaking something. The rest of the meeting was awkward. My mom tried to smooth things over, saying we should all move past this, but it was clear whose side most of the family was on. We left the house with an uneasy truce. No one would talk about the engagement party or my absence again, but the tension was thicker than ever. The engagement party happened a week later. I didn't attend, obviously, but the aftermath made sure I couldn't escape it. Apparently, one of Matt's uncles got a little too drunk and started loudly complaining about my absence. Someone sent me a text about it, saying it was embarrassing for Matt, which honestly just sounded like karma to me. Then came the group chat resurgence. A day after the party, someone posted a photo dump from the event, complete with captions like a perfect night with all the people who matter. Subtle. Another relative posted a blurry photo of Matt and his fiancée with a caption about fake family missing out on real love. I didn't respond, and I muted the chat again. What I wasn't expecting was the anonymous support. Over the next few days, I got a handful of private messages from relatives I didn't even know very well. They told me they understood why I was upset and that they agreed the family treated me unfairly, but they were too scared to speak up. One of them even said Matt's ego was getting out of control. It was nice to know I wasn't completely alone in this. By the end of the week, I was still feeling drained, so I turned to Reddit again. I updated everyone on the family meeting, Matt's meltdown, and the group chat drama. I wanted to know if I had handled it the right way, or if there was something I could have done differently. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive. People reminded me that standing up for myself wasn't wrong, even if it made others uncomfortable. For now, I'm sticking to my decision. Matt's party is over, and the dust is starting to settle, but I have a feeling this isn't the last I'll hear about it. Update 3. If you thought things had peaked after the engagement party, buckle up. It turns out that was just the warm-up. This week, the situation hit a whole new level of chaos. It started with a message from Matt. For once, it wasn't in the family group chat, but sent directly to me. He said it was in the best interest of everyone involved that I don't attend his wedding. He didn't outright call it an uninvited, but let's be real. That's exactly what it was. The message was phrased as if he were doing me a favor, sparing me the awkwardness of being around true family. I screenshot it and forwarded it to Zach. His response was short, good riddance. Of course, my mom found out almost immediately. I don't know if Matt told her or if someone else spilled the beans, but the next day she called me in tears. She said this whole situation was tearing the family apart and that I needed to fix it. She kept going on about how Matt was only reacting this way because he felt hurt and how I should be the one to extend an olive branch. I didn't say much during the call. It was clear she wasn't interested in hearing my side. My dad, on the other hand, had a completely different take. He called me later that evening, his voice calm but firm. He told me to use this time to focus on my own happiness and not let the family's drama consume me. You've done what you can, he said. Now it's their problem. But the real twist came from an unexpected source. A distant relative, someone I barely talked to, reached out to me privately. They told me they had some information about Matt that might explain why he'd been acting the way he had. At first, I thought it was just more gossip, but then they dropped the bombshell. Matt and his fiancée were dealing with serious financial struggles. According to this relative, the over-the-top engagement party wasn't fully paid for. It was funded by loans and credit cards. Apparently, they'd hoped to get some help from family to cover wedding expenses, and Matt had been banking on me pitching in as a way to make amends. If that wasn't enough, this relative had receipts. They sent me screenshots of messages between Matt and another family member. In the messages, Matt complained about how I wasn't good for anything and accused me of deliberately sabotaging the engagement because I refused to contribute financially. Seeing those words in black and white was a gut punch, but it also made everything click. This wasn't just about me skipping the party, it was about money and control. I wasn't going to let this slide. I took the screenshots straight to the family group chat. I uploaded them without context, letting the receipts speak for themselves. The chat went silent for a good 5 minutes before the first message popped up. It was from one of my aunts asking if this was real. That opened the floodgates. People started pinging Matt, asking him to explain. Matt eventually responded, claiming the screenshots were taken out of context and accusing me of hacking into his private messages. It was such a ridiculous deflection that even some of his usual supporters called him out. Still, a few loyalists took his side, saying I'd gone too far by bringing private conversations into the group chat. At this point, the family was more divided than ever. Some relatives were furious with Matt, saying his behavior was unacceptable. Others thought I had escalated things unnecessarily. Meanwhile, Zach suggested it was time to start putting real distance between us and my family. They've shown you who they are, he said. You don't have to keep proving your worth to them. As if on cue, Matt went into full damage control mode on social media. He posted a series of vague updates about fake family and haters who can't stand seeing others happy. A few of his friends and family members chimed in with supportive comments, but most of the reactions were lukewarm. It was clear his audience was getting tired of the drama. Then, something unexpected happened. Chris, my sibling who had sided with Matt earlier, reached out to me privately. They admitted they'd been wrong to pile on and said they regretted getting involved. It wasn't a full apology, but it felt like the start of mending that bridge. I brought all of this up in my next therapy session, and my therapist didn't mince words. They applauded me for standing my ground and reminded me that I couldn't control how others reacted to my boundaries. Hearing that validation helped more than I expected. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. It's not that the situation is resolved, far from it, but I feel like I've reclaimed some control. The family is still in shambles, Matt is still posting his cryptic updates, and I'm still getting the occasional passive-aggressive text from relatives. But I've muted the noise and focused on what matters, my own peace. When I updated Reddit about the uninvited, the bombshell revelation, and the group chat confrontation, the response was overwhelming. People were quick to reassure me that I'd done the right thing. Some even shared similar experiences with family drama, which was oddly comforting. For now, I'm stepping back. Matt's wedding is months away, and who knows what will happen between now and then. But one thing is certain, I'm not apologizing and I'm not backing down. Update 4. The day of Matt's wedding came and went, and as expected, I wasn't there. The days leading up to it were surprisingly quiet, but the morning of the event, my phone started buzzing. First, it was my mom. She called twice, leaving voicemails asking me to think about this one last time. Then came a flurry of texts from extended family, all with the same theme: I'd regret not being there. I ignored them all. Zach and I spent the day relaxing at home, making a conscious effort to steer clear of social media. I knew the group chat would be flooded with pictures and updates, and I had no desire to see any of it. For most of the day, things felt calm, until I got a text from one of my cousins who was actually at the wedding. Their message read, "This wedding is a mess. You dodged a bullet. I didn't press for details, but about an hour later, they sent another text. Apparently, Matt and his fiancée were arguing with some family members during the reception. One of my uncles had a little too much to drink and started loudly complaining about the cost of the engagement party and how the family had been expected to help fund the wedding. According to my cousin, the vibe was tense and awkward, with some guests quietly leaving early. That wasn't even the most shocking part. Later that evening, another cousin reached out and told me that the same drunk uncle had accidentally spilled the beans about Matt's financial troubles. He was overheard saying something like, "All this and they're broke?" Apparently, the news spread quickly among the guests, and by the end of the night, it was the main topic of conversation. Not long after the wedding, Matt made another grand exit from the family group chat. This time, it wasn't subtle. He posted a long message saying he was cutting ties with me forever and didn't want anything to do with toxic people who ruin family unity. Then, in true Matt fashion, he followed it up with a dramatic exit from the chat. A few relatives sent supportive messages, but most people stayed quiet. What surprised me most was what happened next. Chris, my sibling who had sided with Matt in the beginning, spoke up in the chat. They said they had been wrong to criticize me and that the family had treated me unfairly for years. They even called out Matt for his manipulative behavior and said it was time the family stopped making excuses for him. I could practically hear the collective gasp from the rest of the family. In the days that followed, more pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. The whispers about Matt's financial situation weren't just wedding gossip anymore. A few relatives came forward to confirm that Matt and his fiancée had been struggling to make ends meet for months. The engagement party and wedding had been financed almost entirely through loans, with the expectation that the family would help cover the costs. Once people realized they'd been played, the tide started turning. I started receiving private messages from relatives who had previously taken Matt's side. Some apologized for how they'd treated me and admitted they hadn't seen the full picture. Others tried to justify their behavior, saying they had only sided with Matt because they didn't want to cause drama. A couple of relatives even hinted that Matt had been bad-mouthing me to the family for years, painting me as the difficult one to justify his actions. By this point, I had made up my mind. I decided to go no contact with most of the family, including Matt. The group chat was still active, but I muted it indefinitely and blocked Matt on every platform. I wasn't going to let his drama seep into my life any longer. Zach and I celebrated this decision by booking a small weekend getaway. It wasn't anything fancy, just a cozy cabin a few hours away, but it felt like a fresh start. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't worrying about family drama. I was just focused on spending time with Zach and appreciating the peace we had created for ourselves. When I updated Reddit about the fallout from the wedding, the response was overwhelming. People flooded the comments with support, telling me I'd made the right call by standing my ground. Some even shared their own stories about toxic family dynamics, which made me feel less alone. One comment that stuck with me was, "Family is supposed to add to your life, not drain it. You did what was best for you." Looking back, this whole situation has been a mess, but I've learned a lot. I've seen who really has my back, and I've realized I don't need to bend over backward to please people who don't respect me. Matt may still be spinning his narrative, but I'm done playing his games. My focus now is on building a future with Zach and surrounding myself with people who genuinely care. Who knows what will happen next, but for now I'm at peace. And that's more than enough. Update 5. It's been a few months since Matt's wedding, and I can honestly say my life has never been more peaceful. Going no contact with most of my family was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but it's also been one of the best. The group chat has been muted for so long that I almost forgot it existed until Chris, my sibling, reached out to me directly. They said they wanted to start over and work on rebuilding our relationship. At first, I wasn't sure if it was genuine or just another way to drag me back into the family drama, but Chris surprised me. They apologized, not just for siding with Matt during the engagement mess, but for years of being distant and dismissive. They admitted they had felt pressured to go along with the family's narrative and hadn't realized how unfair it was to me until the wedding fallout. We started talking more regularly, and it's been refreshing to have a connection with at least one person in the family who genuinely wants to move forward. Chris even stopped attending family events, saying they couldn't stomach the way everyone kept pretending like Matt hadn't manipulated the entire situation. Speaking of Matt, the man who swore he was cutting me off forever apparently had a change of heart. A few weeks ago, he sent me a friend request on Facebook, followed by a message asking if we could talk. I didn't respond. After everything that happened, I have no interest in rekindling that relationship. From what I've heard through Chris and a few others, Matt's attempts to reconnect aren't out of remorse. They're because his relationships with other family members are starting to crumble. Turns out, when someone burns bridges long enough, eventually there's no one left to take their side. Meanwhile, life on my end has been full of positive changes. The biggest one? Zach and I are officially engaged. He proposed during our weekend getaway, right after the wedding chaos died down. It was simple and intimate, just the two of us on a quiet hike. I think the timing was perfect. It felt like a fresh start after months of family drama. We've been focusing on planning a wedding that feels true to us, with only the people we genuinely care about. Therapy has also been a game changer. I've been working with my therapist to process everything that happened with my family and to understand the patterns that led to so much conflict. During one session, my therapist pointed out something that really stuck with me. Walking away from toxic situations isn't just about self-preservation. It's also about breaking the cycle so it doesn't carry over into other areas of your life. That's been my focus lately, creating healthy boundaries and building relationships that are supportive, not draining. The holidays rolled around not long after Zach proposed, and for the first time, I didn't feel obligated to join the usual family gatherings. Instead, Zach and I started our own tradition, a cozy dinner with a few close friends and some family members we actually enjoy spending time with. Chris even came, which was a nice surprise. It was low-key and drama-free, exactly what I needed. Of course, the extended family drama didn't just disappear. I've heard through the grapevine that Matt is still alienating people with his antics. After the wedding, some family members started questioning his behavior more openly, especially after the financial struggles became public knowledge. Apparently, a few of his closest supporters are now keeping their distance. I'm not sure how he's handling it, and to be honest, I don't really care. I've spent enough energy on Matt for a lifetime. When I shared all of this in my final Reddit update, the response was overwhelming. The post went viral, with thousands of people commenting about how they could relate to my experience or how inspired they were by my decision to prioritize my peace. Some shared their own stories about going no contact with toxic family members, while others just cheered me on for sticking to my boundaries. It was heartwarming to see so many people rooting for me, especially after months of feeling like the villain in my own family. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. A year ago, I would have bent over backward to avoid upsetting my family, even at the expense of my own well-being. Now, I've learned that it's okay to say no, to stand up for myself, and to walk away from relationships that aren't healthy. Moving forward, my focus is on the life Zach and I are building together. I'm excited for our wedding, our new traditions, and the community of friends and family who truly support us. The extended family drama might still linger in the background, but it's not my burden anymore. To anyone out there dealing with similar issues, it's not easy to set boundaries, and the fallout can be messy, but sometimes it's the only way to protect your peace. Thank you to everyone who followed along with my story and offered words of encouragement. It meant more than you'll ever know.